Welcome to Moonbeaming, a podcast about creativity, magic, tarot, lunar living, and more. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener, and I am so happy you are here today. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Moonbeaming, a podcast about life, love, dreams, tea, magic, tarot. I don't know what else. All kinds of other things. What's going on, babes? What's going on, bunnies? You all right? I'm okay. And I cannot believe we are so deep into February already. We are, about 7 or so days away from a full moon on the 28th that I cannot wait for. It also is the last day of the month. Again, how did we get here? So let's talk about the card of the week. The card of the week that I pulled is, drumroll, the Six of Wands. Yes, please. Let's bask in this energy. The Six of Wands wants us to give ourselves a promotion, internally and externally. It's a call to really check in with how you're viewing yourself, with how you're treating yourself, and really check out behaviors that you're doing. And if those correlates to where you want to be and what you're ready for, what you are planning on stepping into, or what you're already in. I think sometimes with the Six of Wands, imposter syndrome stuff could come up. So watch for that this week. You are being given opportunities because you're you and because you're awesome. So just watch that. And also if you're really feeling called to start something, or you're feeling called to put yourself out there in a certain way, or have a conversation that you've been needing to have, watch out where your little internal doubt stops you from moving forward. I've never heard anyone talk about this with the Six of Wands, but there's a vulnerability, I think, with this card, because we're choosing to say, I'm worth it. We're choosing to believe that. And that's vulnerability. There's also a vulnerability inherent in leadership, which is also what this archetype can be about. Where are you leading? Where do you need? I wanted to change the way I said that. Where do you need to take the lead? Have you just been waiting? I've spoken about this, I think, in my newsletter before, but sometimes we unconsciously are waiting for other people to give us permission, or we're waiting for other people to tell us we're ready. And the Six of Wands wants to assure you, you're ready. You're ready. You have to be your own permission slip. So, define what movement looks like for you. Define what success looks like for you as energy is continuing to build. The other thing I wanted to mention with this card is the Six of Wands often connotes a turning of the corner, or a rebalance of some sort. When we decide to differentiate ourselves in a particular way, when we allow ourselves to shine unabashedly, there can be a particular strain of relief that accompanies that decision. So maybe this week is the time to focus your efforts and attention in that realm. Where are you shining? Where are you putting yourself out there? Where are you being you? And if there's vulnerability there, especially if you're listening and you're creative, I'm right there with you. But we've got to allow ourselves the chance to be intimate with that creative energy. And we've got to allow the opportunity for other people to say yes to us. Where are you cutting yourself off from allowing other people to say yes to you? And also, I'm realizing like in these card of the weeks, the card of the week themselves could just be the episode. And I'm like, is this just what the episode should be? Is this what Moonbeaming should be? Should just be talking about one card for like 20 minutes? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I still like doing the deep dives. Last but not least, though, because I'm your friendly neighborhood witch that wants to help you out as much as I can, sometimes turning the corner or a rebalance is simply deciding to move on. Don't take the bait. Question this week. What are you moving towards? What do you want more of? What battles need to be stepped away from? This reminds me of a spell story I like to share. This one time, I cast a spell for peace. I really was craving peace. I lit a blue candle and everything. I really did it. And then, of course, all this chaos ensued. The opposite of peace moved into my world. Of course, right? Of course. Of course. The way the wind blows. And it wasn't that my spell didn't work. It was that part of the spell was about remembering that peace always has to come from within. No one can give it to you, right? It's something we need to develop, and we have to decide how we respond. So that's real Six of Wands. Don't take the bait. What battles are you choosing to cling to? Where do you need to move on? This week, we've got such a great show. I am, as always, delighted with the overlap of the card of the week and the subject of the show, because the guest that we have for this show really vibes with this vulnerable, often hopeful qualities that we see in the Six of Wands. My guest today is the lovely Eryn Johnson. Eryn has a podcast that I'm sure a lot of you listen to. It's called Living Open. She calls herself a healing artist. She's a breathwork facilitator, tarot reader, energy healer, and is truly one of the sweetest, most angelic creatures I know. In this episode, we cover a lot of ground. We talk about how Eryn came to these different modalities, how she works with and fuses so many of these different modalities. Eryn also talks about her process of healing from religious trauma. This is like the Hierophant content we want right there, and so much more, of course. We also talk a bit about her experience with taking my Moonbeaming course, which is now open for enrollment. In the course, Eryn focused on developing and boosting self-love. And so we talked about that. We talked about her process, what transpired for her after the course, and what her relationship with the moon is like. So I know you're going to love this episode. It felt like a warm hug. Eryn often feels like the energy of a warm hug. So without further ado, the lovely Eryn Johnson.
Eryn, I was hoping that you could introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name's Eryn, obviously. I do a lot of things. Mostly, I'm just a human person, witch, trying to exist and be okay. But I'm calling myself these days a healing artist, which I think we'll get into. But I facilitate healing work in a lot of different ways and in an intuitive way as well. So that name feels right for now. Who knows? Could change it at some point. And I also am a writer and a poet, and I've been leaning a lot more into that part of myself these past couple years. So, yeah, happy to be here.
Oh, let's talk. So, I want to talk about a couple things then. How do you define, at least right now, how do you define healing? What does that mean to you?
Hmm. I think to me, it means coming back to wholeness. My kind of foundational belief system is that people are inherently good and inherently whole and inherently lovable. And yeah, the world and trauma and systems of oppression and different experiences kind of take that from us. And so, for me, and I think for many of us, most of us, a process of healing is needed to come back to who we always have been, not about like becoming something different or changing who we are, but remembering who we are more so. So, that's how I think about it.
And what do the modalities that you practice help support your healing?
Yeah, in so many ways. I mean, I've worked with a lot of different things throughout my journey, and mostly now I'm facilitating breath work and doing energy work and meditation and all those kinds of things, as well as tarot. But for my practice, they're all different ways of touching different parts of myself. They're different practices that can bring things up, and sometimes they'll feel sometimes some modalities will feel like what I need in the moment versus something else. And yeah, I think they all have their own way of bringing things up, of helping process, of helping me see, of helping integrate, and helping me feel seen as well.
So when you say like they help you feel seen, what exactly do you mean? Could you give an example with, let's say, energy work?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely thinking about tarot when I was saying that, but
And go with that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, my tarot practice is something I ebb and flow with a lot, but I know that I feel so much more grounded in myself when I work with the cards and they're reflecting back to me what I already feel to be true. Like even this morning, I pulled a card just like, what do I need to know right now? What's going on right now? And it was the Ace of Wands. I have it next to me, actually. And that felt really right for what I was already feeling. I'm in my follicular phase, which I follow a lot, and was feeling inspired and feeling creative and excited to like work on some different projects. And Ace of Wands for being reflected back to me felt like, yeah, go with that. What you feel is real.
Yeah. That's what is that one of your interpretations of the Ace of Wands?
Definitely. Yeah.
Like creative intuition, spark kind of energy?
Yeah, when I pull the Ace of Wands, usually that's how I'm feeling. And I also think of it as a loving reminder that it's okay to be optimistic. I'm a Libra and I'm just endlessly optimistic, even when there are so many reasons not to be. I can't help myself. And the Ace of Wands is, yeah, a card that reflects back to me like, that's okay, follow that. That's beautiful. That's something that's good for you.
I love that. I was curious. So you practice breath work, Reiki, tarot. What else am I forgetting?
Those are the big things, but often when I work with people, we'll also weave in things like meditation or writing or storytelling is a big one as well, which is another part of that seeing and being seen practice that is everything to me.
So, how do you know when to work with one, or do you have a schedule? Do you like when is it, do you just use your intuition? I was hoping you could sort of talk about how they inform one another. Do they weave together? Are they
Mm.
separate? Do you go to one thing when you're looking for one sort of experience? Do you go to another when you feel a different kind of way. I was hoping you could speak a little bit about that.
Definitely. Yeah, it's all really intuitive for me. It doesn't work super well for me to be like, 1 week I'm going to work with this and next week I'll do that. I really need to be excited about working with something for it to really feel powerful for me. And they definitely weave together and inform each other. Often energy work is a really nice way for me to process what comes up in breath work or what comes up in my writing practice or with the tarot. Tarot is really powerful for helping me drop into more of that ritual space. And I think anything can be ritual, but I really like incorporating tarot with ritual. So I might choose to work with that in that way. And maybe that brings something up that I'm like, oh, I'm really feeling this in my body. Some breath work would really help me move that or explore that a little bit more. So they definitely weave together. And I think that's the beautiful thing about them.
Did they come into your life when you were needing something specific?
They came into my life when I was needing purpose. I felt really confused and lost at the time that these different modalities came into my life. I was practicing a lot of yoga and meditation, and I was teaching yoga, and those were kind of my practices, which I think is a pretty common story for people. But it felt like it wasn't quite it, and I needed more support or just different support. And I also felt really disconnected from the work that I was doing and I was asking a lot of those questions like, what is my purpose? I don't think this is what I'm here to do, but I don't know what that is. And working with all of these different tools has, not that I'm like, I know my purpose every day, and my views on that have evolved a lot as well. But yeah, they definitely came into my life in a time where I was lost and I was confused.
Did they underscore your purpose in terms of a belonging to self or getting connected to self or becoming more grounded within your already authentic nature? Or were they sort of like this journey process that reflected what you needed at that time? Or like how do you sort of think about it when you say like they gave me my purpose? Like that's a big statement. So I was hoping you could just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, they helped me heal. And I think more accurately, they helped me see where I needed healing. And maybe you can relate to this, but I definitely felt like I don't even know what's wrong. Like I don't even know what's inside that needs to come out, or I don't understand why I feel this way or why I have this pattern. And of course, I still have things I don't understand about myself or patterns. But they supported that journey of understanding like, oh, I have some real unpacking and deprogramming and things to move through, and offered some answers. And also, I think helped me ask better questions and see things more bigger picture. Like maybe it's not about this is what your purpose is and it's this specific thing, but maybe your purpose is to love and to be yourself. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very Hierophant way of seeing things. If anyone listening is really resonating with what you just said in terms of, I don't even know where to begin, or I don't even know what's going on, what advice would you give them?
Follow your curiosity. That's what it was for me, definitely. The thing I felt the most curious about was, just for example, I felt really curious about why I kept doing this thing in relationship and why I couldn't seem to stop doing it. So that was an entry point for me. And even with different modalities and getting more specific about things, it was really just, I felt curious about this thing I had heard about. And I think that's just a way that intuition expresses itself for me. And I think that felt more accessible to me than like tune into my intuition and figure out what I need. Curiosity was just there. So it was something I already knew and could follow.
Right. So you would say maybe like to folks listening, start with this thing that keeps coming up, and if you've always been curious about learning how to double dutch or long distance running or meditation, follow that. So it's like kind of both, and it's like look to see what keeps happening, what the kind of grooves of a certain pattern are. Ask questions instead of placing judgment, have conversations with it instead of shutting it down or trying to control it, and sort of see what arises out of that.
Yeah, I think when we're paying attention, we don't really have to look too far for things that need healing. And I mean, an example of that for me, when you said long distance running, was my pole dance practice. I started doing pole because I was curious about it and it sounded like it would be fun. And it actually brought up so much around my body and my sexual expression. And so following that thing, which might have seemed unrelated to a spiritual practice or to healing, was totally not and taught me a lot and still does, continues to.
I love that. I wish I was strong enough, like literally, like I have a bad back and some injuries. I don't think pole dancing's for me, but it looks super fun.
It's super fun. Yeah, maybe floor work is for you. I love floor work too.
I could just wiggle like a worm on the ground after this. I'll feel great. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Exactly. Everyone can just find their own curious thread. I wanted to talk to you too, since we're talking about like following our curiosity and engaging in different kinds of modalities, especially modalities that, for all of you folks listening, I am a white person. Eryn is a white person. There has been such a long history of white people, particularly in spirituality, but let's face it, just about everywhere, stealing and extracting from modalities that aren't in their ancestry, right?
Yeah.
So I was curious if you could speak to like any thoughts you have on this in your own personal exploration. You shared yoga. I know that you also, I think you're like at a really high level in Reiki, right?
Yeah.
And, and I think, and breath work. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about like your thoughts on that, how you sort of, how you kind of navigate being someone who's white and working with practices that aren't from an ancestral lineage, because I also know that you're someone who cares deeply about social justice and you think about these topics. So I was just hoping you could share your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. I think it's so important for us to be talking about, especially as white people. And yeah, one of the reasons that I stopped teaching yoga was it felt like it wasn't right for me to do as a white person. And to be honest, there might come a time where I feel that way about other work that I do. I might feel that way about Reiki at some point too, or breath work. And I think right now where I'm at with working with these different healing modalities is in, first and foremost, of course, having reparations and justice practices built into my business. Like, I'm making money off of these healing modalities. This is my work. And so money needs to be given back. And that's really important. And also leaning into my own ancestry and my own practices. I think this is a huge topic too, but I think for a lot of white people and for myself, definitely, I have felt so disconnected from my ancestry and from my ancestral practices. And so starting to learn more about what my European ancestors were doing in terms of energy work, what were their practices, asking those kinds of questions helps me to understand what my lineage actually is and where I'm coming from, and kind of integrating them in a way into what I'm doing. And then I think at some point for me, the question still is like, should these practices even be integrated, or should I just not be practicing some of these things? I think for breath work, that feels like a really tight and crunchy spot for me, especially because that's probably the thing that I love the most and I feel the most connected to and has been the most powerful over anything in my life. And so I'm kind of in a place with that of like sharing the lineage that it comes from when I facilitate, of course, redistributing money like I talked about, and also listening. I think we can get into a trap where we only want to listen to people who are saying what we want to hear. Like, it's okay for you to practice this thing if you're doing this, or if you're in this specific circumstance or whatever, and listening to people who are from these cultures, who are Indigenous people and people of color, and what their thoughts are about these practices being offered and their thoughts about their ancestral lineages. And yeah, I think it's complicated. I'm not sure I have any answers, but yeah, definitely these are things that I think about a lot, and my thoughts around them are evolving all the time.
Yeah, I think so much like in my own life, I think so much about what part of me that thinks I have access to certain things is just simply my
Mm.
whiteness. And it's like simply my unconscious bias that's like, well, I can come up with any kind of, framing if this is what I really want to do. And like for me with breath work, the teacher that I had or the teachers that I had were very unethical. Like it was a very unethical experience. And I didn't feel at all like it somehow there was a lot of red flags. So I felt for me, I would never teach it. Like for me, I agree with you, Eryn. I think you're talking about like the 3-part pattern.
Yep.
It's really amazing. And there are other things like it, like holotropic breath work and all kinds of other breath work lineages. But for me, I was like, I can't take money for this. This doesn't feel trauma informed. This doesn't feel right. I would have had to do a lot other supplementary training, which some folks I know have done, but it just felt really like not aligned for me. And then with Reiki, I'm really slowly learning Reiki with my teacher Sid Yang, and I really love their take on it because number one, they are their background, they're Asian. Number two, they're really committed to teaching the cultural lineage, the ancestral connections. There's a very strong lineage there, And number three, it's super long. It's not like a weekend workshop,
Yeah.
that you do in Silver Lake for like 4 hours. And all of a sudden you're like this sort of certified guru or whatever the hell. Like, it's like we've been doing it for like a year. It'll probably be another year. I don't even know at this point if I'll ever do it for money. I certainly bring it in with my sessions because I think probably similar to you, Eryn, I was doing energy work. I just didn't realize it. Like I wasn't, you're kind of like, oh, it has a name. So for me, it's like, I think a lot about time, like how long are we learning, who we're learning from, what leaders from those cultures have to say about it,
Yeah.
And of course, like you said, there's not one pat answer or way to do it. The reason why I teach so few topics is because those are the topics I feel like I have experience with and also some kind of access to. Some other ones just don't feel like resonant at all. So I appreciate you sharing. Was there ever, so you stopped doing yoga. What questions do you think folks who are like interested in this topic, what do you think are some questions folks could be asking themselves?
I think a big one for me is, am I actually engaging in deep relationship with this practice? Am I respecting this practice? Or am I just kind of dabbling? Am I like, am I not giving the practice the depth of attention and study that it deserves and requires? Because these are really sacred and powerful practices. And like you said, it's like we can take a 4-hour workshop and then be like, I'm a healer now and I can practice this modality. But like, is that really respectful to the modality itself, to the people it comes from? So I think that's a really important question to ask. And what are our intentions around that as well? Like, why do we want to be practicing? Is something I'm checking in with a lot. And I think there can be a lot of ego in that. I find that in myself sometimes. There's ego there around wanting to feel a certain way about myself. And so I think checking in on intention is really powerful. And what's my plan for giving back? What's my plan for being actually in exchange with this thing that I'm offering and not just taking from it?
Yeah, absolutely. Having a two-way relationship or three-way or four-way or however many ways instead of just this one-way extractive model, I think are all really important. I love that so much. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about something I know folks really want to know more about and something that you have personal experience with, and that is your process of healing from religious trauma. I was hoping you could talk, I guess we could kind of start at the beginning however that looks.
Yeah, we can start at the beginning. First of all, I will say I really started talking about this last year, which was my personal Hierophant year. So as a spoiler alert for our collective Hierophant year, I think this is only going to come up more. But yeah, so I grew up in an evangelical Christian family, a Southern Baptist family. I wasn't saying that it was evangelical at the time, but with space and distance, I can definitely classify it that way. And to put it bluntly, it really messed me up, and I didn't understand why. And I didn't even understand what some of the impacts were and how they were connected to that upbringing until later. And I was left with all of these questions and a lot of feelings about how I grew up as well, and harm that I experienced in church, in my family as a result of religious dogma, and continue to still experience sometimes as I'm still in relationship with my family. And that's a complicated topic as well. But I think what's present for me right now around religious trauma is a lot of anger. Has been surfacing a lot around what I feel like was taken from me and what's not possible in my relationship with my family. Things that I've struggled with now that I can trace back to be like, oh, that didn't just come from nowhere. That came from this specific dogmatic religion that I had no choice in. I wasn't allowed to opt out of it until I turned 18 and left my family's home, right? I wasn't allowed to opt out of religion as a 6-year-old, a 10-year-old. And so a lot of that anger is for that self too, who didn't have choices and had those things forced upon them in a way that made it really hard to see clearly.
I think that is probably such a relatable experience. Even as you're speaking, I shared with you before we began recording, I don't necessarily have that other than living in America, because it's even seeing everything politically that's happening in our country and how linked it is to evangelical Christian dogma. There's no separation between church and state. Like, we are like a Christian nation, even with, I don't know if you probably didn't watch the inauguration because you love yourself, but I watched part of it and I was shocked, like, at how much they invoked a specific form of religion. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, this is like the biggest day politically, and we're calling upon, all of these, we're calling upon a very specific religion and philosophy, which is, I just was like, because again, I'm not really out here churching it up, or I'm not super aware, but it's really in. And I was hoping you could share, what you said was so poignant of like that younger Eryn who didn't have a choice. I'm wondering like how that comes up now for you personally in like recovering or reclaiming certain aspects of self.
Oh, so much. Sometimes it's like just connecting with that self and telling her she's not going to go to hell. That is still something that is really scary, and I think is can be one of the more traumatizing aspects of evangelical Christianity, is this fear and terror that we're kind of instilled with if we grow up in it from a really young age about dying and being separated from our family and suffering forever, which is terrifying for anyone, but especially for children. So there's definitely some reparenting practice in that for me around like, you're not going to go to hell. It's okay. You're safe. And she also developed a lot of really compulsive tendencies around needing to like accept Jesus over and over and over again. Like, I remember being terrified that I would like go to sleep and the rapture would happen, which is what evangelical Christians believe to be like all the Christians disappear from the earth and it kind of becomes like hell on earth, basically. And I remember feeling terrified that would happen while I was like asleep or something, and I wouldn't have like prayed to Jesus soon enough, or like, so yeah, a lot of that practice is like, I just need to help her feel safe and feel like she is okay. And I don't always succeed at that, but I'm always trying to offer that. And also connecting with her and things around like you're allowed to believe whatever you want. These things that you were taught don't have to be true for you. I've also shared about internalized homophobia and biphobia that was specifically, definitely from religion, and how shameful that felt for me when I started to realize, like, oh, I'm a queer person, I'm bisexual. And that little Eryn inside me is still saying, that's not safe, that's bad, you can't be that. Yeah, I kind of forgot what your question was, but those are some of the, yeah.
No, no, like how you recover that. Like I hear you saying there's a lot of reparenting. I hear you saying there's a lot of like really simple grounding and like secure exercises in a very I'm sure folks listening can find those in books around trauma and actually before I forget, I wanted to talk to you about this because you sort of mentioned it a little bit there a moment ago. What was that segue between evangelism and witchcraft like?
Yeah, I saw this meme the other day that was so funny, and it was like an evangelical Christian person tweeting like the thing that Christians need to do to like save our world or whatever is to have a bunch of kids and raise them in Christianity and homeschool them. And I was just like, this is us now. We're all the queers and all the witches. But yeah, the bridge was kind of my natural rebellious spirit of being like, that's not for me. I want to go experience everything now. So kind of flipped onto the other side. I could not wait in high school to leave home and to experiment with like drugs and sex. And I wanted to have all those things that were like, I think I really just wanted them because they were bad, in quotes. I was taught they were bad. So I definitely had my mind opened as I went away to college, and yoga and meditation were that segue in for me. They were that bridge of practice that started to help me understand myself as a spiritual being after I completely rejected any spiritual or religious practice from my upbringing. So it was a return in a much different, non-dogmatic sense. And then I started to explore it all. Witchcraft felt like something that was just made for me, which it's not obviously, but when I found that practice and learned about that practice, I was like, that is me. Like, this is what I always should have been. This is what I always have been. And parts of witchcraft that just resonated so deeply were around connecting to the body and the body as being holy, around connecting to nature and the moon and honoring all of these things that I learned I wasn't supposed to do, but that felt so right. I could never really get on board with the idea of humans being inherently sinful or bad, or the body being sinful, even though I tried to get on board with it. And a practice like witchcraft that, kind of affirmed those things as like, no, you're right. The body is good. Nature is good. The moon is good. You are good. What you feel is okay. Was just what I needed and still is.
Yeah. So witchcraft really kind of helped also, I suppose, like heal some of those. Like, what do you love the most about witchcraft? Or what are some of the things?
I love everything about witchcraft. It has felt like a way for me to reclaim some of my power. That's something I really, really love about witchcraft, especially, like I said, coming from an upbringing where that power was taken from me in ways around religion. So as a practice to reclaim power, and I just love the emphasis on the body, or at least my witchcraft practice has an emphasis on the body, on pleasure and sexuality and our emotions and just everything about our bodies being sacred and being something that matters and is important and is a source of wisdom for us. And of course, I love all of the little like crystals and stuff too, but those are the big things.
I love that. I love that. So you spoke about the moon, and I wanted to talk to you about that because you took one of my moonbeaming classes, and you're even in the book I wrote as one of the contributors. I was hoping you could sort of share a little bit about your process and your practice and like what kind of opened up for you. Because you were, I think, when folks take my class, some of them they go all in. They're like, I'm doing it in real time. Some folks do it on their own pace. Some folks sort of are like, they take what works for them. But I remember you were like, I'm doing this. Like you were like doing it. So
Yes.
what was the experience like for you to work around like one entire moon cycle, like how I teach?
I was definitely, I'm going all in on this. That's very much my style and personality. It was powerful. I think definitely the reason that I have a practice with the moon that feels so integrated in my life is because of your work and your class. So I'm, very grateful for that. But before, I think I had a more singular and more extractive relationship with the moon. Thinking of like my spells and my rituals and workings as being like little boxes. Like this is a thing that I do with this moon phase, and it's just, I won't really work with it or think about it again until the next moon phase. And maybe I'm doing something else and I'm not really working with that anymore anyways. But your class, I think the biggest thing it opened up for me was that connection throughout every phase, and how working with something and healing something is a thread that each phase of the moon can support in. And that's a practice and approach to things like manifesting that really resonated with me, because it's sort of new agey, whatever, spirituality manifesting thing was never for me and never resonated. But through your class and learning how to work with a cycle holistically, I learned how to manifest in ways that feel good and feel supportive for me, and that include an understanding of shadow work, which is so important.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? If we don't do the inner work to look at our own, in quotes, stuff around that which we're trying to transform around, it's sort of like putting the Band-Aid on, or I don't know I'm trying to think of another metaphor, but we have to really be able to like clear out some of the underlying subconscious stuff that we've taken with us. Sometimes, like you were talking about with like religious trauma, often it's not even us. Like often it's been put on us. And I think also when we can recognize what's been put on us, like what's not from us, it makes it easier to let go. I'm not saying it's not painful. I'm not saying it's not full of grief and heartbreak, but it does, for me at least, it makes it easier to think of what I'm separating myself from, or what I'm letting go of or clearing. It was something that was sort of programmed into me, and I can program it out with like love and compassion, and you were talking about this earlier. I'm going to use this word again. So much of this is about healing, because if you get the thing, or like you get the partner or the job or the attention, and you haven't cleared out some of that stuff, it makes it a lot harder to receive it, and it makes it a lot harder to enjoy it and be with it. So yeah, that's definitely like a big part. I wanted to talk about, I remember your topic that you were orbiting around in the class, because you shared about it in the book, was around love and self-love.
Yeah.
How has your understanding of this shifted? I know it's just something that grows and changes, but like what are some of your thoughts? Share with us on self-love and the importance of it.
Oh, I love this question so much. I think I'm in a phase right now of integration around a lot of this kind of work. And right now, one of the things that's coming up for me around self-love is that sometimes I need to have a bit of a fierce love for myself. Over the past couple of years, I think the version of love that I needed was much more whatever you need, it's okay. It was just like so soft and gentle and tender, which is beautiful. And that was what I needed. And I think now I'm sort of shifting into a space of like, okay, sometimes showing up for myself and doing stuff I don't want to do is love. Doing some of that, things I know make me feel really good, but I don't want to, is love. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is love for ourselves can look and does look so many different ways and shifts and evolves over time. And the biggest thread for me is like, how am I talking to myself? What am I saying to myself? What am I offering to myself? What am I repeating to myself? And is it true? Like, is that how I want to talk to myself? And if it's not, it's usually for me, it's not just flipping a switch, but it's about pausing and noticing like, oh, first of all, that might not even be me. That might be somebody else completely who's saying that really nasty thing in my head. And pausing and noticing, like, that's not how I want to talk to myself. I don't actually agree with that. Or if I do agree with it, noticing that too and saying, well, I don't want to agree with that. So that might be something that I like take into a practice, like breath work or something like that, or even work with for a whole moon cycle or a few, or yeah.
So I really like how we're like circling back. This is a very lunar conversation now. And I want to actually pin that. And I want to ask you about that for folks who might be curious. And I'm curious too. So you've talked about mindfulness and fierce love. And I love this. And I'm going to put another pin in that too, in my own brain, so I don't forget another question I want to ask you. But when you say, I'm going to take this to breath work, I'm going to take this to a modality, what would that look like? Like give me an example of maybe something you tried a while ago that really helped you.
Yeah, the example that's coming up is someone says online that they don't like my work, or something about it is like, whatever, people like don't always like work that you do, which is hard pills to swallow. But sometimes that can really send me into a spiral. It can send me into doubting myself, into feeling like I just want to be really, really tiny and never make anything again and never share anything again ever, which I don't actually want. But in the moment,
babe, yeah. I went back into therapy because of like online messages and things. So you don't have to explain anything to me. Like it can get really intense.
Yes, it definitely can. And so with that example, like that, what I'm feeling then, if I'm able to, I will go right into it and just give myself some space to breathe. And that helps me liberate a feeling, really, is what it is. It helps me cry if I need to cry, or actually touch what I'm feeling and let it move through me, instead of just letting it be this like tight, hard ball inside me of shame or self-doubt or anger or whatever it is. So it creates some movement.
I see. So you'll be you'll take it to the floor or the bed or the mat or wherever. You'll take the feeling there. You'll breathe with it. You'll stay with it. You'll be intimate with it. You'll allow whatever physical, somatic response to the feeling to come out however it needs to. You give yourself that space and time, whether it's crying or screaming or being really soft and gentle with yourself, until you feel as though the emotion has like moved through you, or you've gained some insights, or you've sort of transformed it in a particular kind of way. Is that sort of making sense?
Yeah, I think you're saying it better than I did, but yes, that is what I mean. And sometimes it's like the practice wants to become something else. Maybe I breathe for like 5 minutes and I have a quick cry, like that's what I need. And then I'm like, something's coming up and I need to write about it now and I want to dig in. And yeah, it's all kind of just fluid, I guess, which feels appropriate for a podcast about the moon.
Yeah. And then my last question is the fierce love that you talked about that I really love. Are you saying that is fierce love like discipline? What is fierce love like?
Yeah, sometimes it's discipline. This year so far, it's been discipline. It's been making myself move my body every day, even when I don't want to, because it changes everything for me. It completely shifts my mental health. It's just so good. And so I guess when I say fierce love, I'm really meaning like showing up again, to bring it back to that parent, showing up as that parent for myself who maybe isn't like, oh, it's fine if you just eat candy all night and watch 10 episodes on Netflix. It is fine. But the fierce parent is like, you're going to feel better if you watch a couple episodes and eat some candy, but then you eat some vegetables and you go to sleep and you do those things and show up for yourself in the way that you need to.
Yeah, I love that. So, Eryn, this has been such a pleasure. I want you to share what you are offering. I know you have an offering around religious trauma. I know you have many other. Could you just share with folks what you're doing now, what you're up to, and where folks can find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm on Instagram at ERYNJ_, and my website is living-open.com. You can find my podcast there, Living Open, my religious trauma workbook, which is a workbook I wrote last year that's intended to be support for people who are healing from the impacts of dogmatic religion. And I'm also doing a lot of work right now around creative and visibility support for people, which I love, and I'm so in that right now. As a big spotlight for me in the past year has been on my own creative practice and poetry and writing, so doing lots of things in lots of ways.
I love that, and I'll put it on the show notes. Thank you so much, and hopefully I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And that's our episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it. It felt like a warm hug for me. Eryn reminds me of a warm hug. So if you liked hearing from Eryn and want to connect with her more, there are links in the show notes. If you are interested and excited about signing up for the upcoming Moonbeaming class, the link to that is also in the show notes. And of course, if you have questions about the course, feel free to reach out to my studio about that. I am wishing everyone a beautiful week. Thank you so much for listening. Until soon. You are listening to Moonbeaming, a podcast that is presented by modern women. I'm your host, Sarah Faith Gottesdiener. The editor is Caitlin George Parker. Music is by Will Owen and myself. All right, bye. Witches in the flow of life, choosing who they are, dreaming dreams so magically. There's a